Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel on YouTube is Discerning What is True. Today is January the 17th, 2023, and I have a channel also Discerning What is True on Odyssey. And when you're looking on YouTube for my channel, that is, you look under their videos and you have to look under live in order to see the most recent videos I'm doing here. So I'm going to be reading a particular piece of work here. It's called The Nature of a Remedy. And I think these names are not truly the names. This is from American Bulletin, July to August 2006, The Nature of a Remedy. Um, this possibly could be Gene Keating, but I don't know if it is or not. Gene Keating is spelled Jeankeating. He recently passed away last year, but it's also got what I would call fictitious names, maybe, or real names, named by Jim Rivers and Obi-Wan Kenobi. So that's why I said it might be a fictitious name. So, what is the purpose of this white paper? In its simplest forms, it is to address the question that is asked by almost every so-called free man and intimate who has ever been railroaded by a totally corrupt so-called judicial system. For the individual who knows they have actually committed crime against their fellow man. Their outrage of being incarcerated is severely subdued by self-admission of guilt and expectations of punishment if caught. So it is the truly outraged individual railroaded by the system who will be the most motivated to make a concerted effort to understand the information presented here and pursue its remedy. So what is the system? Without a fundamental understanding of what the system actually is and some understanding of how it got this way, there's virtually no possibility of understanding and correcting, implementing a remedy. The subject of what the system is, as opposed to what the system appears to be, could easily encompass a 1,000-page book. A history book explaining the events of the past that led up to a present state of the system could easily fill up several thousand pages. And even if such books were in your possession, would you make the effort to digest the information? And even more importantly, how could you know it was the truth? Or was it just a bunch of half-baked theories that fall apart upon the serious examination by objective analysis? Obviously, the extreme brief paper will make no attempt to prove anything stated within regarding the system, will, or necessity by simply asserting as fact, firmly established as irrefutable, yet facts that will probably contradict everything you thought you understood about the system. You will either face up to the fact that you have been deceived and lied to all of your life, folks. We've all been lied to about everything. Okay? About almost everything you think you know about the global financial prison that all of the entire world is now part of, also referred to as the system. But those of you, the vast majority of humanity, who believe that such an evil global system of grand deception and enslavement cannot possibly exist, the mere suggestion of it sounding like the utterance of those conspiracy nuts and usually dismissed as kooks. I suggest you immediately cease reading any further, since I have no intentions of communicating with the hopelessly brain-dead masses on these matters. It goes against my nature to be simply making assertions that are not backed up with rigorous proof, when I am necessarily going to have to just move forward and assert the facts as irrefutable truth. If you demand the truth in life without compromise, you will eventually come to the same truth about the system. And what do I mean by that system? The system consists of all the institutions that man has created to organize, control, sustain itself, in particular the government, religion, and commerce. There's no sharp demarcations between these three institutional entities, and in fact, are so hopelessly intertwined that I will refer to them as the system. And also see the first Matrix movie again and again and again. So this book was actually written in 2006. Okay. Fact one: the system in today's world on a global widespread basis is now completely dominated, controlled by the forces of darkness. Satan, Lucifer, devil, whatever. This is not some mystical, this is not a mystical, superstitious raving. The dark forces are absolutely for real, are extremely ingenious in their science of controlling the people's thinking and control all governments of men and control the vast, overwhelming majority of all religions, and in particular, all of so-called Christendom, not true Christianity, represented by the harlot upon the beast in the Revelation scripture. And for our analysis, the most important realization is that the financial/economic systems, in particular the banking, the principal control level point of the commerce game, and the resulting enslavement of all of mankind. There is ample, if not massive, confirmation that one indeed seems to be now well approaching the final battle of righteousness over Satan's pure evil. So, where did the concept that the concept simply is that, you know, we were taught in high school or school, I should say, that, you own your land. Or, what about the concept simply is that real money was gold and silver, you see, something of value that everyone understood. And why are these things not taught in school? Maybe you shouldn't be going to school, really. Fact number two, probably as much as a little over 80% of the American people still believe, that's right, over 80% believe that man's problems can be solved by political action, that is voting, having an informed opinion on political matters. They accept what they hear on the media and believe that authority can be trusted. Less than 10% of this group will ever realize how profoundly deceived they have been. Yes, indeed, we have been totally programmed. We've been totally programmed in this realm. This in this area. This is not all the whole spectrum, folks. This is just one area. They're talking about, your finances. We've been deceived in who we are. Okay. We've been deceived as simply as that we're just, just a man or woman. And there's big changes that are happening all around us. You know that. You see that, but you deny those things, you see. And part of this simply is to be aware, to basically open your eyes. I say, open your eyes and, have ears to hear. And in reality, simply is, folks, there are plenty of resources on this planet. There always will be. And that's what they use, a trick they use is scarcity. We need to have, this whole thing, the climate change, which used to be global warming, global cooling. None of that worked. So they're now doing this another parameter here, which are basically going to make it even worse for us, far worse. The world and all its resources, its most important being is the human slave. Resources are in fact controlled by extremely wealthy and powerful families whose ingenious extortion strategies has become the foundation of the world economy. That is a global economic slavery through the creation of fictional indebtedness by imposition of centralized banking to only deprive the people of all property and freedom. 4. Secret societies such as the Illuminati, that is the Luciferians, Freemasons, that is the 33-degree level and above, and others are keepers of the arcane knowledge that guarantees their keeping of ordinary people in political, economic, and spiritual bondage. Major breakthroughs in science such as physics, medicine, engineering, etc. have long been consistently suppressed by these groups for the purpose of maintaining plunder and control of the unthinking masses. Fact number 5, the original de jure Republican form of government, not the Republican Party, folks, okay, given to us by our founding fathers, referred to as the United States of America, was that the U was non-capitalized, lower state, so was S, so is O. The only part that was actually capitalized was the A in America. Has been replaced by a stealth deception with a private, foreign-owned, and operated for profit, that is to plunder us. De facto corporate democracy, not a Republican in actuality, a municipal corporation of the District of Columbia or the United States. That is the all caps United States being incorporated in England, our former enemy in 1878. This was all done in 1878. So we're going to continue. So, fact number 6. The state of Ohio. The state of Ohio state of Ohio is all caps, or any state of such and such, refers not to the legitimate de jure republic, a party to the Constitution for the United States of America, the only part being capital A, but are incorporated, no physical boundaries defined in their Constitution, municipal corporate instrumentality of the United States, all caps again. Fraudulently established under the Buck Act of 1940, these de facto government impersonators, having no actually lawful authority over any inhabitants of the several states of the United States, being ultra virus and util to the corporate charter. They are the purest form of total fraud and deception against the peoples. Fact number 7. All the state, that is courts found within the state of Ohio, in all caps, or any state of such and such, being brought into existence under the fraudulent authority of the state of, have never had any lawful authority over their inhabitants, only over the fictions. That's what your all caps seal. Now, some of this is very simple if you just see what they've done to you. And that's what I'm trying to lift the reveal to you and actually lift the veil of what's going on before us. When you actually see this, you will realize and everything will fall. Okay? Have never had any lawful authority over the inhabitants, only on the fictions they created and the trustees of those fictions, never the sovereigns unless tricked into becoming a co-trustee. Fact 8. In order to overcome the total lack of lawful authority over inhabitants in their bogus courts, a fictional constructed trust, that is your name spelled in all caps, in fact, another federal instrumentality. It creates under fraud to deceive the inhabitant into believing he is subject to the private copyright statutory whims of the de facto corporate government impersonators. So when it says fact in here, de facto is opposite. It's not about facts, okay? It's the opposite of the fact, though. Okay? The words are there to tell you something there. Number 9, fact number 9. Also called judges who in fact are in the business of enforcing private copyright statutes and codes are judicial officers, but rather mere executive administrators of a private for profit plunder municipal corporation having absolutely no lawful or legal authority over the sovereign inhabitants. They pulled the wool over our heads, folks. They really have. Fact number 10. The United States and its instrumentalities, such as the state of such and such, created constructive trusts named after inhabitants of the land, that is name spelled in all capital letters, in order to deceive the lawful inhabitants of its true identity and substantial rights, and fraudulent made the inhabitants liable for the debts and obligations of the United States, in all caps, and or in its instrumentalities. Fact 11. The United States and its instrumentalities, such as state of such and such, never recognize lawful inhabitants of the land. Let's see. And only recognize the fictitious creation of the United States, as in all caps, and its other instrumentalities. So this is similar to what we call, let's just give an example, mandate. A mandate is not a law, folks. Never has, never will be. Okay? And part of this whole idea is, if I could explain it in astrology in ways, we are living in the age of Pisces, which is water. That's where the idea in the Bible you hear of water baptism, okay? Part of what we call Christianity belief systems. You see? So it's all about commerce. It's about ships trading with one another, supposedly so-called countries trading with one another. They had to have a way of actually with flowing commerce, so to speak. That's their excuse. And so we're no longer what we call, if you look at Genesis, that we're not on the land. We're not seen as being inhabitants of the land. And that's the problem, because we're seen as commerce. We're not seen as living human beings or living beings, so to speak. We're being plundered by these people. And only recognizes the fictitious creation of the United States in its instrumentalities, which is again in all caps. Fact 12. The United States District Court, as constituted in the several states a party to the Constitution, are completely outlawed, illegitimate, constitutionally unauthorized, private courts impersonating the true Article III courts referred to as District Court of the United States, which no longer exists anywhere and cannot be elicited into existence by any known means. Fact number 13. The so-called Supreme Court of the United States is currently not functionally as a Article III constitutionality authorized court, but rather only as a high admiralty court that consistently asserts no comment when confronted with the simple question, are you the one Supreme Court described in Article III of the Constitution for the United States of America? Do you wonder why they don't answer that question? Is what he's talking about here. Most of the courts now no longer have juries. You see, no jury at all. The fact number 14, the corporate de facto democracy, not the de jure Republic of the United States of America, went into bankruptcy in 1933, creating a legal vacuum, the void of which was filled by fictional constructs of fraud that led to the judicial system becoming the most corrupt legal system in the world without peer. An identified recent candidate for nomination to the Supreme Court of the United States, that is Edith Jones, appellate judge, publicly stated that the American legal system is corrupt almost beyond recognition. Fact number 15. That is all so-called crimes or crime are in fact strictly a commercial matter as stated in 27 CFR 72.11 Code of Federal Regulations. Fact number 16. Ever since June 5th, 1933, because of the bankruptcy of the United States, in all caps, when House Joint Resolution 192 was unanimously passed, it was all passed unanimously, folks, passed and becoming public policy, no longer public law. Per Public Law 73-10, all products of the industrial economic system are legal, lawful, necessity prepaid, i.e., everything must be paid for by the government to preclude the charges of high treason against Congress, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Board of Governors of Federal Reserve Bank, and the Comptroller of the Currency. This is a historical, irrefutable fact that has been kept secret from you for over 93 years. Time to see the truth, folks. So, what can we conclude from these facts? Now, these particular assertions being stated as facts, the following conclusions can be readily arrived at. Pursuing, that is number one, pursuing any remedy within the so-called courts is a proverbial barking up the wrong tree, since the so-called courts have an immense financial incentive, as much as $10,000 a day per inmate. To convict any and everyone, innocent or guilty, is totally irrelevant. The pretend court only takes in the big bucks upon securing convictions at all costs or as a compromise, obtain lucrative bribes from its victims. There exists virtually no men and women of integrity left anywhere in the so-called judicial system because potential whistleblowers are not tolerated. The exceptions are indeed for a few between, and those remaining few are virtually powerless to help you. Number 3. Much as the Chicago mobster, that is Al Capone, was virtually untouchable against the direct activities he engaged in, he was vulnerable indirectly through issues of taxation. Interesting. 4. The courts, consisting of the clerk of the court, prosecutor, deputy prosecutor, pretend judge, and defense attorney, are all profoundly vulnerable to the issues of tax delinquent against their persons for the bonds and bills. That is, true bill, being generated off the credit of its accused victims as products of statutes. The product of statutes is nothing than, let us say, a product of industrial factory that builds automobiles. All these products are indeed prepaid, yet the people in their profound ignorance are expected to somehow pay for these things, even though after the U.S. bankruptcy, the people no longer could pay their debts as at law, since it was now legally impossible, that is, no precious metals back the currency anymore after confiscation of the gold by the executive order, which was done by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We forget who the real sovereigns are. It's precisely this inability of the people to pay at law their debts that empowers them under Public Law 73-10 to be able to exercise their exemption from payment to achieve the set-off mutual cancellation of debt for and all debts that the sovereign accepts. We are all sovereigns pursuant to the unanimous Declaration of Independence of July 4, 1776, making us subject to no other men, only God, the absolute sovereign. All men are created equal. Now, do you remember we being the sovereign are the only source of commercial energy? That is, so all funds that exist within the economic ultimately belong to a sovereign inhabitant on the land. No government has the capacity to generate any positive commercial energy, only to generate destruction, debt, death, and a pure parasitical existence upon the productive energy of the sovereign. These concepts are not some pick in the sky mental exercise, but are the hard reality that the dark forces fully recognize and go to such lengths to keep hidden from us. With great ingenuity, and cunning, the dark forces have attempted to totally neutralize these impediments to achieving total enslavement of the sovereigns by making them think they are subjects to their servants, the greatest of all con jobs in the history of man. Is there anything we can do? So how do we turn the tables on the greed, total corruption, and infinite evil in control of this wicked system to assert our sovereignty, to restore the General Republic where everyone is a sovereign with no subjects, and put a stop to the domestic terrorism, rape, robbery, and pillage being committed against the sovereign? Should we just wait for the promised divine destruction of the entire global system as guaranteed to happen eventually, as spoken of in Scripture? Well, that admittedly has a 1,000 batting average so far, but or we have the knowledge to do so, put into action that can free the unjustly incarcerated and help set up circumstances that can severely curtail, if not cause to implode upon itself by its own accord, the criminal enterprise impersonating a judicial system. Since the criminal enterprise impersonating the judicial system is protected and supported and mutually profiting from the plunder they generate, all the way to the Supreme Courts of both state and federal venues. They actually are in the same one federal system, since the state is mere federal instrumentality. Then we must seek remedy outside of the state and federal so-called government de facto that has a superior position. The United States, under its federal instrumentalities, such as the state of such and such, all went bankrupt in 1933 and went in receivership. The creditor in the bankruptcy is the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, which uses their collection/enforcement branch called the Internal Revenue Service. The service payments to phony bankruptcy is being used as a subterfuge to extort money from the people through the income tax scam. The federal tax forms provide a tool for remedy. The federal tax form always suggests the use for extortion of funds from the individual is the Form 1040 or OMB number 1545-0074, even though upon examination of the Office of Management and Budget, all caps, congressionally mandated listing of what this form is to be used for show absolutely no applicability to the subject of individual income tax. It's totally purposely to protest any aspect of the serendities of income tax scam. This form totally supports your tax position you would be asserting. Example of Federal Tax Form 1040 by John Q. Doe. All capped letters designates a legal fiction trust entity is provided. Notice that the prejudice statement states that you have examined the return, the company schedule, and statements you make, and to the best of your knowledge and believe it is true, correct, and complete. This will work to your favor, as we shall see would protect you. I call your attention to line 21. It's attachment which contains a statement that certain issues were being held by recipients. The eligible issue are the listed items. An example, the appearance bond for case CR-55555 was listed. Since this bond was issued since this bond was issued your identity as the commercial energy backing the bond, even though the appearance bond may have only been posted as an arraignment and never actually exercised, this changes nothing in the nature of the bond itself. What is necessary to understand is that the bond is issued, that is posted, and attains its value for commercial energy from the credit/commercial energy of the actual living soul. The principal creditor that is being involved, that is compelled to appear. One may think the appearance bond is worthless document if not exercised to obtain release until trial. But in fact, it's a commercial instrument having commercial value. That is, remember, all crimes are commercial, equal to the assigned amount. The prison/penal bonds. In fact, there also exist other bonds issued in a case which are so-called penal bonds, consist of a series of 3 or 6 bonds, all having an OMB number 9000-0045. It is these bonds, not shown in the example, which are all created behind your back without your knowledge or permission, yet receive their commercial energy from the living sovereign. It is our understanding that these bonds are valued at, wow, $2 million per count, where the count is the number of counts in the true bill indictment, and or the courts, I keep saying courts, I meant to say counts of conviction. The first 3 bonds are the bid bond, SF-24, performance bond, SF-25, and the payment bond of SF-25A. The next 3 bonds with the same OMB number of 9000-0045 are the Miller Act bonds, Sam Frank 273, Sam Frank 274, Sam Frank 275, which may or may not apply to a state case as opposed to federal cases. Each bond issue would constitute a so-called roll, so the total sum of all these penal bonds could be 3 or 6 times $2 million. Number of counts. All these bonds are 1099 OID eligible issue. If you were to also list those as 1099 OID eligible issues, the amount becomes quite large, and the numbers showing up on line 21 and 64 of the federal tax return 1040 would be consistently larger. For simplicity of example, they are not included only the appearance bond, but also can certainly be included also. The description of these bonds would be all OMB number 9000-0045 bonds for case of CR 555-555, state of such and such versus John Q. Doe. In addition to these cases and related bonds, one can also include such eligible issues as traffic tickets, commercial bills of any sort, tax bills, court judgments, in fact. So what you're doing here, you're basically putting up your bill saying, no, you pay for this. You pay for this. I don't pay for this. You see, you've been put in the role of a trustee when you're not supposed to be a trustee in this position. You're supposed to be the beneficiary. And you're also supposed to be the executive of your trust. So, remember, all the products of the economic system are prepaid by virtue of public policy and public law, 73-10, arising out of the necessity of those there no longer existing constitutional authority money to pay at law with. So there's no way you can pay for it, folks. You see, when you had gold and silver, you could pay for it. Once they took away the gold and silver backing of the currency that is mandated by our organic Constitution, Article 1 and Section 10, making it impossible to pay at law for anything, the party government that seized the gold most under public policy paid the bills for us. It's our very inability to pay as law as a result of the executive order seizing the gold in 1933 that gives us the ability and the authority to demand that the items be treated as prepaid. As hard as this might be to accept because of your brainwashing by the global economic prison you have lived in your entire lives. Public policy mandated by 7310 or HJR 192 is an irrefutable fact of life, and many thousands of people have known of this reality all along but kept the truth from you. So the 1099 OID taxes the eligible issue back to source. All these eligible issues can be indeed processed via 1099 OID filing in order to tax the issue back to the source, ultimately you, for settlement and closing of escrow in exchange without money. Treasury Direct, that is your Social Security number, the 1099 OID essentially allows the issuing party to voluntarily the issues to be taxed. These issues were previously fact delinquent deferred taxes that had the appearance of being abandoned property that you never made any claim upon them. Upon identifying the eligible issues, we force these funds to be set aside in essentially a demand deposit account as a federal withholding for recovery as a refund on 1040 at line 64. The 1040 establishes the title to the eligible issuer. The 1040 form simply identifies title to the 1099 OID, eligible issues both being income to you, line 21, as federal withholding, line 64. Commercial instrument presentment only attains commercial energy / value from you. So you are the source. You are the principal creditor. See, once the silver and gold was taken away, folks, that was the credit. But with that, you became the creditor. But you were told that you were the debtor. Okay? However, since you never reached the actual spendable funds when they billed you, they failed to enclose a check to pay with a dishonor in fact. The amount in question is all in withholding status at the time of filing the 1040. The 1040 OID filed earlier affected the federal withholding on the funds that were being previously withheld. In reality, a delinquent deferred tax contraband kept hidden from you unless you learned of existence and taxed it back. A few other line items on 1040 need to be clarified since I have nothing to gain by claiming any exemptions. Actually, only a particular exemption of that. I simply do not bother and put down 0. It really does not matter. Also on line 40, I take no deductions because they are irrelevant to me. Now comes the most interesting part on line 44, the tax. Notice the line says, see page 37. Does that parenthetical enclosed phrase infers in legal duty you are swearing under penalty or perjury to have performed? Any item enclosed as parenthesized or bracketed are strictly considered removed from the document in the legal sense not always strictly adhered to. However, in an ever more fundamental sense, nothing on this page 37 is in any way legally incorporated as being a part of the 1040, which you are attesting to only. Line 44 is somewhat cleverly constructed to trick you into self-assessing yourself some non-zero amount. As any serious student of income tax law has drilled into his head, the individual income tax is voluntary. Contrary to everything you have ever been led to believe, only the taxpayer can assess himself. The IRS has absolutely no legal authority to assess the tax, even though they will try to bluff you. The form line 44 does not in any way exclude you from entering a 0. Even if they attempt to force you to assess a non-zero amount, you could simply 1099 OID that amount and tax that back to source also. They cannot win on this issue. So filing the 1099 OID, the example shows a 1099 OID and the company 1096 that must go with it. The two sample enclosures, which I'm not going to show here at this point, letters show that the correspondence sent to the prosecutor asking him to please file the 1099 OID. It's also recommended that the clerk of court and all assistant prosecutors, in your case, the judge, also be added to the parties contacted. Since the people contacted all will refuse to file the 1099 OIDs, usually even though it is required of them, they will all be in dishonor and become as such eligible to appear in the report as a recipient of the payer. The head prosecutor, as far as we know, as far as we are concerned, was the payer, who actually was paid from your account without your knowledge or consent, which translates to stealing your exemption. So in a sense, you yourself So in a sense, you yourself were the hidden payer. The prosecutor acting as your agent without your knowledge. Normally, the filler of the form 1099 is the same party as the payer, but the fraud caused you to have to be the filer outer of necessity. Every party who dishonors your first letter has become holder due course of the federal liability, and hence should be listed as the recipient box by stating holder dash in dash due due dash course, date of dishonor, and the date of first letter. There could be multiple recipients to the same eligible issue. In a sense, these dishonored parties share the liabilities individually and severally, consistent with the UCC holder in due course protocol. In those cases, you issue as a payer an international bill of exchange (IBOE) or international promissory note, the preferred instrument to use in conformity to the Uncritical Convention on International Bills of Exchange, international promissory notes, to say a court or a court of court for a fine or court cost. The recipient would be the clerk of court, and the payer is you, instead of the agent of you, so-called public servant. Any and everything issued that receives its commerce value from you, your exemption has as its source you. In conclusion, this paper is highly condensed out of necessity, explaining what you can do and who you really are. You are operating with this described procedure. You are in complete conformance to the letter and intent of the law. The system may choose to attempt to imitate you and not laying claim to what is rightfully yours. Do you understand it well enough to be the belligerent claimer? Satan's system does not want you to assert yourself. They will try to intimidate you into silence and acquisition of the docile economic slave you currently are. All it takes is for an evil to prevail, is for a good man to do nothing. To quote Teddy Roosevelt, one of the greatest shortcomings in contemporary society is the ability of many to distinguish between right and wrong, good and evil, as well as a lack of the spirit to fight against injustice. Interesting quote. Fundamentally, peace in our humanity must be backed by the spirit to challenge what is wrong. Peace that acquisition to rampant inquiry represents the belief stillness of a spiritual graveyard. Shutting one's eyes to injustice is not tolerance, folks. It's a little more than cowardice or apathy. It is to those who agree with this paper is dedicated and addressed to. That is in there. I'm going to share, see if I got one more thing I want to share with you. Afterthoughts. It was not made clear in the previous discussion how and why the procedure affects the release of the individual. The corpse, that is the body, is being warehoused by prison system as surety/collateral for the commercial instrument by the pretend corpse discussed earlier. The criminal RICO, that is RICO, Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organization Act, Enterprises, uses your exemption to provide the commercial energy to give it value. When these commercial instruments, eligible issues, are taxed back to source by the sovereign, who in fact is the ultimate source, the accused has now successfully closed escrow on the Treasury Director, or your SS number. So no surety can now be maintained on the instrument. Also, since the escrow is closed, this means, or the means of stealing from one exemption is closed off. So what they've left is simply this, if I understand it correctly. You can look at basically what we call an accounting deal. You have on one side your credits, on one side your debts. It's just that way. And what's happened is that we have been debited, but we've never come back the credit that you see. It's an error on our part, not seeing simply is that it cannot always be all debts, folks. It has to be a credit, always done to balance the books. That's why the United States is supposedly in so much debt. The reason why is no one has actually gotten their money back in the credit. That's why. And a guy named Peter Joseph has explained that pretty well on his videos. He's done some videos also. So we're back off. I'm getting a little okay. So you're getting your exemptions back. It's closed off. So it's balanced. You see, you can't have all credit on one side. You can't have all debit on one side. They've got to be balanced, meaning simply they have to. If you spent $500, you've given $500, you spent $500. That has to be lined up to show there's a zero balance on your checking account, supposedly. Okay, but if it's a credit for $500, a debit for $500, guess what? You never got the credit. You never got it. So anyway, so one needs to open escrow to scam the account. Therefore, they can no longer pay for your warehousing. And if they cannot produce the funds, someone in the system will have to become the scapegoat and go to prison, effectively replacing you. Someone's going to get in trouble. Someone's got to pay for this, you see. Also, as some has correctly guessed, this method can be used to eliminate mortgages, car loans, and credit card balances, since all these contracts are all totally fraudulent. The so-called lender never lent you any money. They have nothing at risk. They simply stole the funds for the allergic loan from your exemption to trick you into paying back what they never lent you in the first place. This is the ultimate scam indeed. This subject is, however, beyond the scope of this paper. It's far more detailed than just this, folks. It's far more than this. But I just wanted to share this short video of this. We'll go on to some more things later on. But I'm going to conclude this video tonight because it's getting late here on the East Coast. So again, I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you watching. And hopefully we can all learn from one another here and eventually become what we call sovereigns. Not a sovereign citizen, folks. That's the difference. We're not citizens. We're not slaves. We're sovereigns. They're supposed to serve us, not us to them. Okay? So I wish you a good night, and you take care, and have a good night.